Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Thursday. It is September the 25th, and thanks so much for joining us. For all of you on Rumble and on YouTube, can you go ahead and hit that like button for me? I'd appreciate that. You guys know that moves us up in the rankings. And also, if you guys think of something spicy that's going on during today's program, drop me a comment. I read almost all of them, especially the ones that are nasty, but more importantly, when you have something poignant, I learned something. We're going to make a new rule for the Kyle Seraphin Show today. And I do think it comes from a place. I don't do trigger warnings. That's not my jam. I don't need to sensitize the audience before we say something. But I will say this. Whenever I play a Joy Reid clip, I will give you forewarning from here on out. There was enough pushback, and it actually hurts my soul. It feels like fingernails scraping down on my spine. So I will give you warning before we do a Joy Reid clip in the future. That's just my promise to you. We've got a lot we're going to cover today, including, apparently, the announcement of a future indictment, no further information, of Jim Comey because reasons. No particular reason, other than we might be running out on the statute of limitations for a potential perjury charge. Pretty weak sauce. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Tylenol and the backlash. If Donald Trump says something, then people act like complete fools after the fact. And a really sad result out of that. Going to talk a little bit more about the ICE shooting yesterday and the mainstream media's take on it. As usual, we do our meta coverage of that piece. And then lastly, the First Amendment. It works for Jimmy Kimmel, doesn't work for everybody. And we're going to talk about what you are not entitled to do under the First Amendment, especially if you're a government employee. So all that coming up in just a second here. Let's get started with a little thank you to my folks over at Silent. If you guys are looking for a little bit of peace and quiet in your life, if you're looking to shut down that tracking on your phone, this is the way you do it. slnt.com/KYLE. You'll save 15% at checkout when you use KYLE. We got to face it. The phone that you carry around is a government tracking device. It's a big tech tracking device. It's a corporate data broker tracking device, and even cyber criminals can take advantage of this. They all want a piece of your digital footprint. They do not ask. They simply take it, and that's why Silent exists. My phone right now is shut out from all of that, sitting in this Silent Faraday bag. You guys, you may not even notice this, but behind me on the wall is one of the Silent hats, which some of you guys actually were looking for, and they may even sell those over on the website too. It says "Silence the Chaos," which is a nice little message. Silent makes Faraday gear. They're gonna back all of the wireless signals. They block them out, whether it be cellular or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or GPS or RFID, NFC. Do you understand how many signals your phone is putting out to so many different devices? No signal means no tracking, no remote access, no breadcrumbs. This is the same technology that's trusted by special operations teams worldwide. I used them when I was a counterintelligence agent in the FBI. It's how you keep secure comms. It's how you protect your sources. And it's one way to avoid surveillance. Most of you probably don't have to worry about that, but you never know. If you guys want to go ahead and just turn things off, even if it's just for the dinner table conversation, protect your family, protect your freedom, and your digital footprint. slnt.com/KYLE. Again, silentnovowels.com/Kyle. There is a link in the show description. You can get off the grid, get silent, and stay invisible to the outside world. Let's go ahead and start with today's program right now. All right, we're going to start off with where we started off yesterday. If you guys didn't listen to our discussion with George Hill, I encourage you to go back and listen yesterday, because all the things that George Hill and I were talking about, speculating, and doing detailed analysis on regarding this SIM farm found by the United States Secret Service in New York City were actually then speculated on by all the papers that I found. PC Magazine did a piece on it, Wired did some stuff, and all the same analysis. They are not seeing the same problems with the questions they're asking, but the official statements don't seem to line up really easily with how do we know what they were doing? How do they know that it was involved in scamming, or was it involved in threats? And how does a group of people that are involved in trying to scam you and take money or information from you also want to call up MTG and make dignitary threats? It doesn't quite align. We're not going to drop the topic there. We will get back to it. But if you didn't listen yesterday, you should do that. The thing that started just before yesterday's show was a discussion about a shooting that happened yesterday in Dallas. And DHS has issued a statement. I'm going to tell you a couple things that are going on, what we know about the shooter, some of the meta-analysis of the media as they covered it, and then lastly, maybe something that's an unpopular take, but I don't like any of this. What you're seeing on the screen right now is a picture of a clip. Yes, that is a clip, not a magazine. It's a stripper clip of what is probably either 8mm or 30-06 ammunition with some writing on it that was apparently found on the rooftop where the shooter was. Now, this was also issued out in a statement by DHS, which is the parent agency for ICE. I'm going to just read it out. It said this morning, meaning yesterday, a sniper opened fire from a nearby rooftop at a U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Dallas field office. The shooter fired indiscriminately at the ICE building, including at a van in the Sallyport where victims were shot. If you guys have never been involved in law enforcement, you don't know how this works. When you take somebody into custody, generally speaking, you go into this sort of interim space. It's kind of like a vestibule or an atrium for vehicles, and it's called the Sallyport. And that's usually where you take them in. Then they're going to do a search. They're going to change the handcuffs up if they need to do that. They take them into multiple different sort of like airlocking doors, and that's how you take folks and process them into a facility. So apparently while the vehicle was in the Sallyport, it was actually shot. 3 detainees were the ones who were actually shot. No ICE officers. 1 detainee is deceased. 2 others in critical condition. And then the gunman was found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. If you want to see it, there are pictures on the internet, and they are really gruesome and pretty graphic and nasty. All of that is one part of the story, and that's the official statement. Additionally, the FBI director tweeted out this photograph that you are seeing on the screen right now, including pictures of bullets that were apparently found next to the subject. And there's a real problem with this because this was minutes after a homicide, an attempted homicide on the 2 that survived. Apparently they're in critical condition in Dallas. And then, potentially an attack on law enforcement. Who's to say that this was a single person, unilateral, lone gunman type attack and that nobody else was involved in this? The fact of the matter is, a few minutes into it, you do not know in law enforcement. You just can't know. And so you're sharing now pictures of evidence in a very massive public platform. And there are ways to release that, but I would think that the FBI director's individual Twitter account or X account is not the right way to go about doing that. Because now he puts himself in the position to be called to a stand. And I'm going to actually cover that a little bit later on because a judge has actually ruled in the Luigi Maggione case that government statements are wholly inappropriate and they are biasing the pool of potential jurors, which is something I told you guys about the other day. Now, just for your awareness, I saw that picture of the clip, and yes, it is called a clip. A clip is usually a piece of metal that holds onto the rim of a centerfire cartridge and allows you to load them more properly into either a fixed magazine or maybe a detachable magazine. And so this is the on the right-hand side of the screen here, you're seeing the picture of the alleged shooter's whatever this is, evidence left behind. It says anti-ICE written in one. There's some other writing that's hard to decipher, and there's some rain on top of it. On the left side, what you're seeing is a superimposed image of M2 30-06 ball ammunition. And they look pretty similar, both the way that they're laid out and the way that they're patterned, and even the necking of the cartridge and so on. Below it is some stuff that I had. This is a World War II rifle that's just a family heirloom that's hanging out in our house, and that's some 303 Brit. So there were questions because all the gun nuts always want to know what's being used. The interesting thing is we're seeing assassins and people who are sniping from elevated positions taking sort of the same tactic, and they're using what looks like mil surplus rifles. There's a speculation going on online on X, and I don't know that it has any bearing on this at all, but people said if you notice the people that were taking shots prior to the USAID money going away, they all had nicer rifles, and some of them were very expensive, and nobody could figure out how they were able to afford them. And then suddenly the funding gets cut off, and now we're seeing these garbage mil-surp rifles. I don't actually think that's what's going on, but for those of you that want to dabble in the conspiracy theories, that is something that's being said. Now, a little bit of meta coverage. Let's talk about what the vice president went out. He was talking about defending law enforcement and giving them sort of the default position that they signed up to do something hard and scary, that there are bad people out there, and we shouldn't be praising anybody. We certainly shouldn't be demonizing law enforcement writ large. There are obviously always going to be bad cops. There's going to be bad law enforcement officers on the federal level. That happens. But that doesn't mean that we should go out there and say that an entire agency is doing something in bad faith. This is an argument that's going to go back and forth now, because we've seen the second, in this case, it's the third in Texas alone, in the same district of ICE, where people are going out and laying in wait, shooting at ICE facilities, putting in bomb threats, and so on. And so we're going to kind of cover, this is the vice president. I don't think he's being deliberately inflammatory, although it seemed to upset some people. Here he was talking yesterday.
And I think that is the most disgusting thing. The very people who keep us safe ought to be honored and protected and praised by Democrats and Republicans alike. It is time to stop the rhetorical assault on law enforcement. Because here's what happens. Because here's what happens when Democrats like Gavin Newsom did say that these people are part of an authoritarian government. When the left-wing media lies about what they're doing, when they lie about who they're arresting, when they lie about the actual job of law enforcement, what they're doing is encouraging crazy people to go and commit violence. You don't have to agree with my immigration policies. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump's immigration policies. But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell, and you have no place in the political conversation of the United States of America.
All right, so he gives them the go to hell bit, and maybe that's a little bit over the top. He's not wrong. I think people are a little bit frustrated, and there certainly is a rhetoric that's coming from one side of the aisle that is saying the same thing, and I'm going to give you guys a compilation clip of this. But let's first just address the clip that we had from Gavin Newsom. It was pretty obvious to me yesterday that this was the same sort of language that these folks are acting on. If you constantly go out and demonize and act like there is no due process when we talk about immigration enforcement, you've got an issue here, because there actually isn't the same type of due process that you find in the criminal sphere, but that is due process, and it's been upheld by many courts. And until people started paying attention to it recently, and the so-called mass deportation that the Trump administration is going to get into, this wasn't a question. Here's Gavin Newsom saying what I think is also very inflammatory stuff, and I think this is far worse than what J.D. Vance had to say. I think J.D. Vance's response is not that far off, and I'm going to give you another example in just a second as well.
That's happening in the United States of America. Masked men jumping out of unmarked cars, people disappearing, no due process, no oversight, zero accountability, happening in the United States of America today. People ask, well, is authoritarianism, you're being hyperbolic? Bull, we're being hyperbolic. If you're a black and brown community, it's here in this country. And so I'm deeply proud that I had the privilege of signing the nation's first bill to address the issue of masking, also to require you have simple identification, to your point.
This was the same argument that was being made in Portland. You guys will recall that in Portland in 2020, there were a bunch of people that were attacking federal facilities. They were going after the federal courthouse out there. They were also going after the Portland Police Bureau, who were federally deputized, at least a lot of them were. And the concern at that point in time was the exact same claim that's being made here by Gavin Newsom, that people were wearing masks and nobody knew who they were, and they were popping out and pulling people into unmarked cars like minivans and so on and so forth. And yeah, that is a tactic that law enforcement uses. But to say that they're not marked is pretty ridiculous. If you look at any of these ICE raids that have gone on, they all have placards that say things like FBI or police or Homeland Security or ICE or ATF or whatever agency they're with. So they're all pretty well marked. Now, one of the issues is that federal law enforcement doesn't actually have a uniform. And if you don't have a uniform, then maybe it's a little bit more difficult. If you're used to seeing police officers who are all in green, like a sheriff's deputy, or they're all in blue, like you find in a local PD, okay, maybe you have that expectation. And so we're educating the public right now. And we had to educate even people like Julie Kelly, who said, I've seen search warrants and I know that there's a uniform. There's no FBI uniform. There's no DHS uniform per se for ICE officers. Now, there is for Border Patrol. And so people get this confusion. Oh, I want to see this certain thing. At the end of the day, it's already a federal offense for someone to impersonate a federal officer, to wear placards that are not appropriate for their actual station if they don't have that charge. So yeah, we're dealing with a scenario where people are wearing this mixed match, and they probably should be better about that. I used to say the same thing. It's like having plaid and T-shirts and girls in booty pants and whatever the heck else you're going to show up in. Pick one thing. At the FBI Academy, they require you to do certain things, like you're supposed to wear a blazer and your body armor underneath it. That seemed really dumb too. But maybe a specific color shirt that has an emblem from your department. They could get them with badges or flags or something like this and make them comfortable to wear under tactical clothes. There is a better way to go about this. So this is probably a learning moment for law enforcement too. But that doesn't mean that you're seeing a bunch of masked people show up and kidnap folks in real life. And that's essentially what Gavin Newsom was trying to make the claim. And it's a disingenuous claim. because he's actually mirroring this other sort of attitude where everybody is doing all the mean things, and it looks something like this. If you keep calling people Gestapo, then you're going to end up having people try to respond like these are fascists that we must resist.
ICE is looking more and more like an American Gestapo.
They're huddled around the elevator banks in masks without identifying information. What a terrifying, like, these are Gestapo tactics.
But it has created this year, as they've seen, the kind of fascist ICE Gestapo militias go round up Latino American citizens in places like LA.
ICE agents, masked ICE Gestapo agents, getting more funding than any other law enforcement agency in the history of the United States.
ICE running Gestapo-like around our country.
The Gestapo had the same function. It was there to draw a distinction between us and them. It was not federally, it was controlled by the leader. And we're seeing disturbing similarities between this force and the Gestapo.
We've got these masked thug cowards kidnapping innocent people and sending them off to be slaves or tortured in other countries.
Dressing like thugs and acting like thugs.
People still want to come here despite the crazy. They still want to come here because they know in this land their voice is protected, their rights are protected, and there won't be jackbooted thugs coming in wearing masks over their face to take them off the streets. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Simone, that's happening.
Oh, it's happening.
That's happening right now.
Got it. Okay, so that's happening. That's the claim. Look, I can stake out kind of a reasonable position. We probably should have uniforms for federal law enforcement that's doing these operations. It makes a lot more sense. Even if it's simply a raid jacket or something that's clearly identifying, like, this is what you should expect. And the public needs to be educated on that. I'm also not crazy about law enforcement wearing masks. The guys that do some of the most dangerous work in federal law enforcement, which is going to be your transactional squads running after drugs, they're going after cartels and so on, they regularly get death threats. And we regularly had to do assessments and figure out, hey, do we need to upgrade their security? Do we need to put a detail on them for a little period of time until things cool off? You'd get people that were investigating corruption in prison, and some shot caller in a prison would say, hey, I want this guy, taken off the map. And so then we'd have to go and look for members of the prison gang that were outside. It's a real risk. It turns out there's a risk in doing law enforcement. I'm speaking from a position of authority on this one, I think. And they actually try to mitigate that. They give you body armor. They give you a handgun. They give you training, and they teach you that what you're doing is not necessarily going to be without any danger. So you have to have people that take on a certain amount of risk to do the work. It seems totally reasonable to me. I want to read to you from this ABC piece real quick. It says that the ICE facilities are on high alert after the deadly attack in Dallas yesterday. The FBI is investigating it as an act of targeted violence. I don't know what an act of targeted violence is under the FBI's authorities. I don't know what specifically they're calling it, but it does seem like they're trying to lean again towards this domestic terrorism thing. Every time I hear the words domestic terrorism and the FBI, it makes me kind of quiver. It doesn't make me feel good. I don't think it should make any of you feel good, because what we're talking about then is that we're going to go after ideologies, and ideologies are about threats. They're not about crimes per se. This was obviously a crime. All right, acting Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Todd Lyons said that he would put all ICE facilities on higher alert after a shooting in the Dallas field office on Wednesday, which killed one detainee and critically wounded two others. No of the officers were injured, and Department of Homeland Security said that the shooting was an attack on ICE as a law enforcement agency. The suspected shooter has been identified by law enforcement as a 29-year-old named Joshua Jahan, or Jahn. Multiple law enforcement sources confirmed. I haven't seen that put out officially, but that does seem to be the person that they've identified. The shooter, who was found on a nearby rooftop, fired indiscriminately at the ICE building. So hopefully we don't get a bunch of these like trained assassin, professional hit story type things when it seems like he probably shot at people he wasn't intending to, including shooting at the van in the Sallyport where the victims were in fact shot. The shooter died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, as we talked about just a little bit ago. They said that the two, previously there was a release that said 2 detainees had been killed and 1 was injured. They ended up switching that up. 1 had died, 2 were shot but survived. One of the wounded is a Mexican national and is being dealt with the Mexican consulate. Law enforcement and Republican politicians suggested a political motive. It's not 100% clear that that's the case, but it's the most likely situation. Lest you think that there's going to be fair coverage of this, let's start with MSNBC talking about just because someone wrote something on their magazines, on their cartridges, on their weapon system, doesn't necessarily mean you know their ideology. That's true, I suppose. Seems awfully quick to go out there and start making excuses. MSNBC has this expert, put expert in air quotes. Let's go ahead and give it a listen.
You can't just assume by that what was written on that shell casing that that's necessarily his motivation. He could have been doing that to thinking it was funny, trying to put law enforcement on the wrong track. This is where, when you analyze the person's phone, computer, talk to his family and friends, that you get an idea of what his motivation perhaps really was.
Okay, I tend to agree with that, except why are we putting out the pictures right away then? And I'm going to get to that in 1 second. The pictures included that writing on the cartridge, one of which said anti-ice. Former FBI, I think, executive Chris O'Leary has a take on that for MSNBC as well. And he's very confused because apparently writing on cartridges has already been staked out by the far right. So why would someone on the far left do it? It turns out maybe crazy people do crazy things.
The writing, the first time we really saw that was Brenton Tarrant in the Christchurch shooting in a mosque in New Zealand. And he was a fierce, white supremacist and neo-Nazi, and wrote all over his weapon and his rounds very hateful information. So to see this coming from potentially the other side of the political spectrum is a little strange because it is not something, if you are trying to, carry out some kind of message countering, more extreme right-wing stuff. I don't know why you would, use a tactic that a famous white supremacist who has been revered and copycatted over the years by other white supremacists, why you would do that. But it does appear that people are moving in that direction because they want people to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. Again, terrorism is theater. They want people to understand their message and why they're doing it.
Isn't that interesting? The commentary piece is always my favorite because you've got to fill up a certain amount of time between your ads. So they're obviously going to get that done. And part of the space in between the ads here is him sort of rambling on that white supremacists do this stuff, and it's very effective at getting out the message, and that person is revered in white supremacy circles. Why would someone on the left choose to do this thing when it's been good for white supremacists? Maybe because it just moves the message forward. There's also a speculation that, this was not his original idea, which you guys heard. Isn't that the best reason for not putting out a bunch of information and what we would call like raw evidence photos? To poison the mind of people that are never going to get the real story, that are never going to look into it any deeper. There's actually a reason why you don't often see crime scene photos released to the public within minutes of somebody committing the crime. And it's so you don't taint the jury pool, because there's a presumption of innocence in this country. We have a couple of amendments that kind of cover that. The Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment are supposed to help people get a fair trial. There's no specific mention of presumption of innocence, but it's baked into the cake. It's part of common law that we should actually realize that the state has the burden of proof. And you're not trying to try these things in the court of public opinion. It's my issue with the Charlie Kirk assassination. I sat in on something that was truly unsettling last night. I listened to thousands of people in a Twitter space going on unhinged rants and ramblings with zero evidence whatsoever outside of just trust me, bro. And they said that Erica Kirk is a Mossad child trafficker, as evidenced by a charity that she had worked at, that she worked for Donald Trump. They're all in on it, and that's why they had to have directed energy weapons that were used to kill Charlie Kirk. There are people who are out there in this country, and they can vote, and they are your neighbors, and they shop in the same grocery store as you, that are walking around believing that because they hear something. This goes to my older premise, and it's something we've talked about on this program a lot, and I want you to consider this in your own life. The proper position, and I rarely tell you the way that you have to think, but I should tell you the way that you should organize your thoughts. It should be skepticism. If you don't have evidence, then it's not good enough to say, in the absence of evidence, I believe anything I like, especially about things that you don't have any bearing on. Like, what does it have to do with you? Almost nothing. The scary thing is that after 2020, and with the sort of devaluation of a lot of our institutional trust, and that's gone in law enforcement, it's gone in government, it's gone in healthcare, our military, they've all ceded trust in the institutional space. And so people do one of two things. They either question everything. I'm a big fan of that, right? I've got the poster on the wall over there. For those of you who can see the studio, it's an X-Files poster. It says, I want to believe, but the answer is you still have to give me evidence. The alternative is anything that I think is good enough, or also known as don't confuse me with the facts. I've already made up my opinion. And that is a really terrible way to operate, because you can be misled by pretty much anything in a whimsical fashion. And again, that goes to that idea that you do not release evidence up front that's going to taint the jury pool, because you're going to end up finding out that that person cannot get a fair trial. I want to cover this story real quickly as well. This is Luigi Maggioni. Remember him? He's accused of killing CEO Brian Thompson in December. That's coming up on a year now. There have been recent comparisons to Charlie Kirk's slaying, just because it's listed as an act of political violence, and whether it's political or not is kind of up to debate. The fact that he had feelings about a private industry, I suppose that's political. Remember, they kicked out the terrorism enhancement on him the other day. A federal judge said Wednesday that Donald Trump and the other administration officials may have violated the law with their recent public statements about Luigi Maggioni. Here's where it comes in. In a court filing, District Judge Margaret Garner ordered the Justice Department to respond to a letter by Maggioni's lawyers sent yesterday, or I guess the day before. The letter accused the Trump administration of violating their client's right to a fair trial in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination. These attorneys referred to several comments in the administration officials that were made about Maggioni in the days after Kirk's killing. It's very dangerous for you in an official government capacity to opine about something that has not been adjudicated in a court of law. That's why people usually stay away from it. Quote, the government has indelibly prejudiced Mr. Maggioni by baselessly linking him to unrelated violent events and left-wing extremist groups, despite there being no connection or affiliation. A recent, tragic, high-profile murder has only increased this prejudicial rhetoric. It goes on to talk about Charlie Kirk. Do you guys see the danger of putting this stuff out? Let's say part one, just in the simplest manner. Let's assume that this person acted alone. Then you're fine. But you don't know that in the minutes following an assassination. And didn't you just hear a quote unquote expert on MSNBC say that they're going to have to evaluate the computer and the phones and see, were people putting him up to it? Was he encouraged by a group? Were other people helping him plan? You can be a co-conspirator. You can be someone who is I guess in this case, you probably won't have somebody who's going to be an accomplice after the fact, but there's all kinds of possibilities that this person may have engaged with others, and that this was not some one lone actor who independently, with no prodding or no information to anyone else, jumped up on a building and decided to shoot at a van. And if that's the case, you are going to have a difficult time now because you've now prejudiced the jury pool. Now, maybe it'll turn out that the guy was acting completely alone and there's nothing else out there, and that'd be fine. But you don't know that in the minutes following. And so you're taking a significant risk, and it's not a necessary risk. And despite the fact that we live in this country where we all want instantaneous gratification, I told you guys the other day, I'm sitting and watching a show, and for the first time in a long time, I've got to wait a week for the next episode to come out the way that I did when I was a kid. And I'm thinking like, oh man, I remember what it was like to have to watch commercials. I remember having to watch at a specific time because TiVo wasn't invented yet. Our society has gained this, like, if you think of it, you can have it, and you can have it right now. So many people are out there with that same attitude. I thought of it, therefore I would like the evidence. I would like the coroner report. I would like, all of the photographed evidence and the witness statements to be made available to me, so I can personally solve this crime to my own satisfaction, despite the fact that I have no standing, that I am not a party to the case, that I actually have nothing except my own curiosity that I'm trying to serve. And that's what I listened to thousands and thousands of people doing last night. They were discussing their personal curiosities as an investigation into the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, I know some of the investigators that are actually on that case or that have participated in some of the interviews. They interviewed hundreds of people. You don't have access to those people. You don't have the authority to compel their statements. You don't even have the credibility to have them sit down and talk to you. You can't go out there and gather evidence and video, and you certainly don't have the time or the resources to do an actual investigation, which the local law enforcement and the federal are doing. So your individual curiosity withstanding, you have no right to know this stuff. And we used to actually know that in this country. But because we are kind of a me, and an instantaneous gratification moment, we can't get away with it. I'll give you a couple more pieces on this ICE shooting, because I do think it reflects very, very intensely on the current moment. And the media coverage of it actually says as much about what's going on in this country as anything else. Before we do that, we're going to talk about my friends over at Patriot Protect. A quick little read for those. Guys, the website is patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Patriot-protect.com/Kyle. Give me 1 second here. I didn't pull all my information up. All right. So Patriot Protect is a company that helps you hide, we'll call it hiding, from scammers and cyber criminals. They use all of their technology to scan the web, to look for all of your data, whether it be your address, your phone number, whether it be your email address, your family connections, and they try to get them off these data broker websites that make you such an easy target for scammers. Criminals, cyber scammers, they're all out there doing one of two things. Either they want to call you up and pretend like they know enough about you to get things from you, or they want to call somebody else up and pretend that they are actually you and have enough information to validate who they are with social security numbers and so on. If you're searchable in Google, and you guys should do this every once in a while, go check and see if you're out there on the web and people can find out who you are, then you're going to find out the possibility of harassment or stalking or scamming are all out there. And for pennies on the dollar, it's scarily easy for criminals to go and do this stuff. It's also shockingly cheap, like pennies on the dollar to get your individual information because they're selling it in aggregate. If you want to be removed from all these data broker websites, if you want to have a company that's scraping the web, check out patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Both my wife and I do it. They'll give you alerts if your stuff is actually in a data breach where someone has sold your information so you can fix it. So you don't have to wait around for someone to try to scam you out of hundreds, thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. All right. Again, the website is in the link in the show description. It's patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Let's get a little bit further into this little discussion about the media coverage, because the media coverage that is always where I'm most interested. What is the narrative spin that's going on? Let's go to MSNBC one more time here. It's Joe Scarborough, and he says, like, the rhetoric is just too heated.
And why? Why do they do this? Like, why is it so important for them? Instead of trying to bring the country together, why is it so important for them to try to tear us apart? Why are they doing this? Why is J.D. Vance continuing to lie when Cato, when CSIS, when every other study shows that the predominance of political violence in America has come from the right? And again, you don't hear me saying, oh, this is all the Republicans' fault. What you hear me saying is these people are crazy, and we, the 90% of the sane people in America, we need to come together.
I keep hearing this talking point, and I don't know if it went out or if it's just a bunch of people that are synergistically understanding the same thing. All of these people are crazy. I think you're a little bit nuts if you decide to go out and do something like a kinetic action and shooting into a crowd or shooting into a van or shooting at a building. And people do this all the time at various different reasons, or no reason at all. There's no reason to understand how that mind operates. But it also is pretty interesting that you're saying, hey, why don't we come together? How come we can't just all get along and agree? And by the way, the people on the right are the ones that are the real problem. I played this yesterday from Hillary Clinton. She does the exact same thing. George Hill and I both listened to it. I want you guys to listen one more time. Remember, we need to come together. We need to stop demonizing each other. And the people on the right are really the problem. You know, is that really the way you're going to convey your message?
That raises a larger question. I mean, we have, and I include myself, we have got to stop demonizing each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I think most of that right now in our country's history is coming, from the right, coming from people who want to dominate. They want their point of view. Writing out slavery from history, that doesn't make it go away. We have got to stop with the finger pointing and the scapegoating. We can have legitimate disagreements. Right? I mean, how do
And then she goes on, if you guys remember from yesterday, she goes on to say, we can have legitimate disagreements as long as they're about the things that I'm going to frame the argument about. And then she goes on and talks about some left-wing talking points. And that's not exactly unifying. I think most of us can see that. And obviously, our chat has decided to go after that as well. So let's talk about something that we theoretically do agree on. You shouldn't probably take shots at law enforcement. Like, we've ceded this authority for personal vengeance and vendettas. We don't do revenge. We don't do posse killings in this country anymore. And I think we're better for not having that. I think that's actually the way it should go. But that doesn't mean that every cop is great. And it doesn't mean that everybody who's been given authority doesn't go out and do something wrong with it. It turns out that a de-weaponized, apolitical federal law enforcement is actually the animal that's supposed to go out there and fix that problem. If you guys don't know, one of the major things that the FBI actually investigates, it's a thing that I did a number of times. I can't tell you how many people we followed home that were local cops, particularly in Washington, D.C. The D.C. Metro PD has significant problems, let's say, in who they recruit and what those people do with that recruitment. They also, in the local jails, both in Baltimore or Maryland more broadly, and D.C. specifically, we were always following home like corrections officers that were taking money and doing shady things. If you have people that abuse the authority and the trust that's given to them by the public, you're supposed to go out there and stop that. So you don't say all law enforcement is terrible, and I don't think most people on the right or the left live that way. Like, they actually can't do it. All the all cops are bastards crew, which I saw when I was out in Portland again, those people can't actually live in the actual world that they've created in their head. How do I know that? Because if someone breaks into their house, what do? beep, beep, beep. They call 911. They immediately pick up the phone. When they are even having their rights infringed on or someone's doing something, they call for a supervisor. They actually do believe in those hierarchies. They actually do believe in those structures. Just push them to the moment where they need it, and suddenly they do. So what they're really asking for is accountability. And I think we can do that. We can also be fair and say that if there's been a couple of targeted actions against a very specific group of demonized, quote unquote, Gestapo federal law enforcement, we might be seeing a trend. And it's okay to acknowledge that. It should be okay, unless you're on CNN and you want to push back against this. Here's a little exchange. These always devolve into sort of chaos, and they always devolve into like the lowest level, non-logical responses. But we'll give it a shot anyway. Let's start off with Abby Phillips.
This is extremely disturbing that there's another one of these types of shootings. I think we've got to deal with this as a country, first of all. But I also, just for starters, I'm curious, how does it help to have the vice president say that?
Because the third one in Texas. I mean, if you know people that work in law enforcement, my family does. I know ICE agents in Texas. This is the third attack we've seen in Texas, in the same district as the man in charge today was saying. Like, this is the second time he's had to have a press conference today.
Who was killed today? Who was killed today?
So you're saying since it wasn't...
That's not what I'm at. No.
So you're saying since it wasn't... It was innocent people that were killed today.
Don't put words in my mouth.
You asked a question. I'm answering your question. You're saying since it wasn't ICE agents that were killed, therefore this is a null and void conversation?
No. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Are you kidding me?
That's gaslighting. I'm asking you a simple question because when J.D. Vance went up there, and when you're coming up here...
This is not a good argument from you.
First of all,
innocent people got shot today, and you're like, well, it wasn't ICE agents that got shot.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the division that you all are sowing in this country...
I'm not sowing anything. I'm saying protect all law enforcement.
Because of the simple...
I don't know why people watch this. It's actually really strange. Every time I see these arguing panels where somebody says, he throws up a red herring, and then when the guy addresses it and says, hey, by the way, that's not what's going on here. He's like, don't put words in my mouth. That's not what I was insinuating or saying. Yes, it was. We know it was. It always reminds me of Starship Troopers, which if you guys haven't seen in a long time, go back and watch it. It's a decidedly capable satire. And it says a lot about our time right now. And a lot of it is this nonsensical news cycle where you'll see these staged fights between people that are supposed to take a side. They're supposed to create conflict. And then everybody sort of watches with their popcorn while two people have these straw man arguments that bash it out and just leave straw everywhere and nobody learns anything. That's what I just saw there. Every single time, it looks like Starship Troopers to me. One of the things that I've been kind of telling you, I think wasn't what was going on. And the argument was not about the First Amendment. It wasn't about actual principles, was the story of Jimmy Kimmel. Remember, there was a left-wing equivalency, I would say a false equivalency, that some guy getting canceled who reportedly made $20 million a year is the same as a man who was 31 years old being killed and not being able to go home to his children and a young wife being widowed. How those things became sort of like even on the same wavelength of discussion is beyond me. But it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Jimmy Kimmel, this is a story coming in from NBC News. Jimmy Kimmel nabs the highest ratings in over a decade with his post-suspension episode. So wait a minute, are you telling me that we created a huge controversy that got covered by all of the media with free press for Jimmy Kimmel's show? Then he was off air for a couple of days. Then he came back to air and everybody wanted to know what he had to say. How quickly will that also fade? The product didn't draw interest in the first place. And it's not going to draw interest long term, but it got exactly the thing that I told you I thought it was about, which was that he wasn't getting great ratings. They created this artificial thing, even though he wasn't on all the networks he could have been, or he wasn't on all the affiliates that he could have been on. And there he got this big boost because people are always interested in controversy. At some point, though, it wanes, and I suspect this will be as well. Jimmy Kimmel's return to late night television after a brief suspension drew 6.26 million viewers, according to preliminary Nielsen ratings, making it the show's highest performing regularly scheduled episode in a decade. Two things about that make it very interesting. He normally gets 1.6 million viewers, so he had almost a 5x performance increase. And also, most people don't watch at this level, and they won't. And it was a decade of this before it even showed up. That tells you something. So that means that the pressure campaign from the crazies, and this is actually going to be something that's going to play into some of the other stuff that's going on in a very national way, it actually does work, at least in the short term. Here is Cynthia Nixon. She's famous for being on Sex and the City, which was a fairly atrocious show. Although I will admit, I think I've seen every single episode of it. So that's a strange thing. That was a different Kyle at a different time. Here's Cynthia Nixon, first complaining about the First Amendment and how she very, very much wanted to see Jimmy Kimmel reinstated, and then the result of her campaign of pressure. Are you ready? This is one of the more nauseating things. I'm not going to do analysis up front. I promise you. Here we go. Let's just listen to her own words.
Hey, I just canceled my Disney Plus and Hulu subscriptions. And they asked me why. I hit other, and I wrote, because I believe in the First Amendment, reinstate Jimmy Kimmel. Now, my whole family is really going to miss Abbott Elementary. We are really going to miss Only Murders in the Building. But you know what? We would miss the First Amendment a whole lot more.
I'm going to cut it because I already played this the other day, and there's only so much Cynthia Nixon I can handle in any given 7-day period. And it's not that much. I'll be real honest with you. Okay. So she names a couple of shows that I've never heard of, and she's really going to miss it, but they would miss the First Amendment more. Thank God the First Amendment has been protected. A multimillionaire, not very funny comedian is back on his perch, and here's what she did. She decided to show us that this was not all fake and gay. This was not all theatrical. By the way, do you remember our little diagram that we had the other day? Everything is like, that's where we are in the middle here. Everything is either in the fake or the gay, but we're actually living in the middle where it's overlapping. Kamala Harris style Venn diagram. Here is Cynthia Nixon celebrating the success of the First Amendment pressure campaign, and she did so by not being a clown. And if you're just listening, this is a great time for you to be on Spotify so you can hit the button that shows the video, because this has to be seen to believed. Folks, look at the head and the headdress. Look at the hands. I'll describe it afterwards. I don't want to ruin it for anybody that hasn't seen this.
Did you watch Kimmel last night? I did. I laughed so hard. I was so happy to see him back. But unfortunately, 20% of Americans were not given the option to watch him. If you were in New Orleans, if you were in Salt Lake, St. Louis, D.C., Nashville, you didn't get a chance. And that's the fault of Sinclair and Nexstar. So if you're in those markets, call those people up, complain, call their advertisers, or just, watch him on YouTube like 9 million people did last night. I, like so many people who in protest canceled their Disney and Hulu subscriptions, have signed back up. So do that too. Disney, Hulu, thank you for doing the right thing. The force is with you.
What? She's got Mickey Mouse hands. Guys, I froze it right here. She has Mickey Mouse ears on her head. Where did she get those? How does she have them? Is this a paid advertisement by Disney? I've got real questions about this. Or is she actually just a professional clown? And she's wearing Mickey Mouse gloves. Big, white, cartoon Mickey Mouse gloves. I don't even know what those cost, but whatever it was too much. What do you want to bet that Disney actually sent her those and said, hey, you were a jerk and you said mean things about our platform. Now we want you to go out there and represent our platform. And could you do that? She was so happy. She laughed so much. Jimmy Kimmel was crying on his return. We showed you guys that when he went out there and talked about Erica Kirk and giving the forgiveness to the assassin, the alleged assassin. How fickle is this goofy lady? I'm telling you. And if you guys didn't get to see it, then you need to go and get yourself set up on Spotify. So that's what we're going to say. There's going to be a little break right here for a Spotify canned ad. It's the only one we do in the middle of the program. So you may hear something right now. And I'll just remind you, this is a great time to go and sign up. Use it. It's free, by the way. It costs you nothing to use Spotify. You can always watch us on Rumble. You can watch us on YouTube. You can watch us on X. If you're watching there, I would appreciate it if you guys were subscribed and if you liked. But on top of all that, if you got sick of seeing all the ads, and I had someone tell me the other day, and this is a real comment that I got, every 2 minutes for a 90-minute podcast, I got an advertisement from YouTube. Well, thanks for monetizing us. We appreciate it, but you needn't. And you can certainly go and can take control of your experience if you guys want to go watch on Spotify. Why are you hitting it so hard? Because I know that it's actually better. And I keep getting comments over on Spotify from people saying, I've never used Spotify before, but it's awesome. Again, if you're watching, now's a great time to go ahead and hit that like button. It does bump us up in the algorithm, and we get monetized on all the platforms, but nothing actually pays us better than Spotify. So I'm real transparent with you, and I'm actually going to do a stream over on our locals. If you guys want to join that, it's kyleserafin.com, where I will break out and I'll show you the back end of what we earn. Like, I don't want to be shy about this or or pretend that something that's not happening. There's not all that much money in the podcast world for most people. And so if you guys are thinking like, hey, I'm going to quit my job and start like a YouTube channel, I will give you either the reasons why or why not to, depending on what your financial needs are, if you guys want to watch over there. So sign up for that. You got to be a member. You don't have to be paid. I'll do it for free over there, but I just don't want to put it out on all the platforms. Again, it's kyleserafin.com. Go be part of our community. It's a bunch of really good people as well. Okay. In the same vein as sort of the goofiness, trying to decide if we want to do drunken Kamala Harris first or if we want to do Tylenol. I guess we'll do drunken Kamala Harris. Let's take a breather from crazy for just a second and do a different version of crazy. Kamala Harris has been running around promoting her book. The book is called 107 Days. And that's not a testament to the First Amendment. I don't know what is, because she was able to write a book and people will buy it. And I have absolutely no idea why they'll be willing to buy it. She's going and doing a media tour. She's going on MSNBC. She's talking to Rachel Maddow. She did this the other day. She's calling Trump an authoritarian and a communist. That's kind of a weird little move. I thought he was a fascist. I guess they don't really care. Oh, what if people use tactics or the same words and they all just wrap around? The political spectrum is not really a straight line from left to right, but it's a circle with a top and a bottom. I don't know. Here she is explaining her thoughts on it, and then we're going to have something that's funny in the middle of this one. No, it's not 107 days sober. This is not an AA meeting. I just saw you guys in the chat. You guys are sick.
A tyrant. We used to compare the strength of our democracy to communist dictators. That's what we're dealing with right now in Donald Trump. And these titans of industry are not speaking up.
Yeah, so she goes on and gives a bunch of canned lines. She's been on about 7 different programs, and at least on the 4 or 5 that I've seen, she's using the same exact talking points. So she's got some sort of a script that she's sticking to, and that's been the commentary. Unless you're a woman named Michelle Norris, who said Kamala Harris is exploring her most painful campaign moments in the 107 Days book. She tried so hard not to write an I told you so book, but she did tell us anyway. That's kind of funny. It's going to be an image that will remain with her long after reading the vice president's book, 107 Days, written with the help of Pulitzer Prize-winning author Geraldine Brooks. The description of her trusted social secretary painstakingly peeling off the frosting from the election night cupcakes that spelled out the words, Madam President. Oh, man. She says, quote, says a lot about how traumatized we both were by what happened that night, that Doug and I never discussed it with each other until I sat down to write this book. And so, in true fashion, you guys know I'm going to make you sit through some of this book. Luckily, we're going to do it with the help of a radio station who still has a sense of humor. This is WPHT Radio in Philadelphia. They decided to take the audiobook, suffer through it so you don't have to, and then they made it slightly more funny than painful by slowing down the audio 30%. So lest you guys misunderstand, this is not her actual audiobook speed. This is 30% slower, and it doesn't sound like 107 Days sober.
I've been going through the Kamala Harris audiobook.
Uh-oh.
Since last night. And yeah, as torturous as that is, my evil brain decided maybe if we slow it down 30%.
Uh-oh.
She sounds drunk. You want me to give you a little sample?
Oh, please do, sir.
In the summer of 2021, during her final trip to Washington as German Chancellor, I hosted Angela Merkel for breakfast at the Vice President's residence.
I think they were serving mimosas.
I am a stickler for being on time. I feel it's a mark of respect. Everyone's time is valuable. But sometimes schedules go sideways and I fall short.
You are an evil genius, Michael. Dude, that is so great.
That's pretty brutal. I don't need to sit and listen to those guys complimenting each other, but that, man, that's tough to listen to, but it might actually make it kind of fun if you were also drinking with her. If you made it a drinking game or something to that effect, I guess you could have a good time with that. All right. So in any case, she's running around doing her book tour. People are taking it in the right amount of seriousness that they ought to. One of the things that's happening that is really serious, but also seriously dumb, is this story about Tylenol. Now, we talked about it the other day. I don't know what the heck. Donald Trump went out and he was supposedly going to be talking about autism, and he was maybe going to be talking about vaccines and potential links between there. And that's kind of been the supposition of the Health and Human Services Secretary. Instead, he went out and kind of like tagged in on Tylenol, which Tylenol even said in public statements going back to 2017, like, do not take our product. It's not tested for safety on women. It is occasionally recommended when there's no other option. And so he decided to kind of demonize it in some weird way. And in true form, for the stupidity of our country, we had women decide, okay, if Donald Trump says it's going to be bad, then I'm going to do it for no particular reason. It's actually one of the saddest and the scariest things. Let me first start with a very pregnant woman. This is a TikTok video, and a lady. I don't always find myself agreeing with people who who have neck tattoos, who have like ridiculous amounts of makeup on. That's just kind of like, that's not the kind of people I get my advice from. But this lady sounds pretty sane. What doesn't sound sane is being visibly very, very pregnant. I don't know if this lady's in the 3rd trimester, but it looks like she's probably pretty close in that range. And she decides she's going to just take Tylenol for no particular reason, simply because Donald Trump said not to. Let me show you how bad that idea is in just one second. So she's showing her belly.
Pregnant. You know what I'm going to take?
So she's what, 30 weeks pregnant?
Some Tylenol to see the benefit.
Why are we making videos like
charm,
this?
And my baby won't have autism.
Yikes. So she's filmed herself doing that. This is obviously a reaction video that we're seeing. There's a lady in the background who's going,
like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Honestly, like, what's wrong with you? What happened to women? Something happened. Tylenol even tweeted, we actually don't recommend using any of our products while pregnant. Congrats on your upcoming edition. So exciting. It'll be great to touch base real quick since we haven't tested Tylenol to be used during pregnancy. With studies and more studies. I get some people are very weak-minded and they can be influenced to be outraged at certain things when they're told to be outraged. But how can any mother, woman, say they love their children so much while putting them at risk simply to make a political point and to get likes and views on social media?
There's some broken brains out there in America, folks. That's a truly dark, ridiculous position that you're going to just take it out of spite because somebody said something. You think Donald Trump cares? Do you think Donald Trump knows that you're putting your baby at risk? And here's the reason why it's at risk. It's basically considered to be unethical in all medical studies to engage pregnant women because the possibility is not just hurting the person that's participating in the study, but also a child that has no ability to consent. Turns out they actually factor that kind of stuff in when they do medical ethics and research. So there are almost no studies on what happens when you use certain drugs, and they sort of speculate in this space. Go out and look. This is pretty common. This is the reason that Western society values women and children at such a high level that we don't actually put them at risk for medical experiments. New York Times jumped in on this, which is always fun to find. They found the few women who absolutely are maybe the cases where Tylenol was a requirement because there was no better option. The president's quote-unquote surreal advice worries pregnant women. So, of course, they're going to go make this thing a thing. And so what do? You go and you prove the rule, or you prove the exception by going out there and ignoring the rule. So this woman says, this is one of those profile pieces, when the burning nerve pain in her back and legs get very bad, Lucy Martinez, who's 27 weeks pregnant, reaches for Tylenol, and it helps. Ms. Martinez, here's the regular story of just a regular girl who also just happened to get like catastrophically injured in a snowboarding accident before finding out she was pregnant, right? Because that's something that all women have to deal with. She's 28 years old. She's of Pocatello, Idaho. She shattered one of her vertebrae in a snowboarding accident in January. A few months later, she found out she was pregnant. So she's injured. Now she's pregnant. She stopped taking heavy painkillers and she's been managing her pregnancy and her recovery simultaneously ever since. She said the pain is unbearable. So she was confused and upset when Donald Trump encouraged pregnant women to tough it out. Do you know how egotistical and narcissistic and navel-gazing it has to be that you're like, I mean, I get it. Like pregnant women are pretty focused on the belly. If you've ever lived with a pregnant woman, they're constantly touching the belly. I get that part. But to think that the president of the United States was individually recommending that your specific medical situation not be addressed with Tylenol is crazy. It's a risk. It's a risk that has to have some payoff. And if you have a high fever and if you have real issues that are going on, like you broke your vertebrae and you can no longer take, some heavier type painkillers, okay, you need an analgesic, we get it. Maybe that's the one. That's the closest option. She's still maybe engaging risk. But that is not everyone. They're even showing this picture. So she's visibly pregnant. She's got an arm brace because she's not able to walk properly. Is that all pregnant women? Of course not. So let's go ahead and prove the exception with this. Maybe you'd like to hear it from a doctor. I used to listen to Dr. Drew when I was growing up. This is actually a pretty reasonable take.
Why would you take it? There's almost zero benefit, and there's a non-zero chance of it being problematic. It's an analgesic, it's an antipyretic. If the fevers are very high, then by all means, your doctor is going to recommend you take Tylenol. But if you have a shoulder pain or some back pain, it's probably not worth the risk. Pregnant women shouldn't be taking anything. And this is just a further reminder of that. Listen, it only takes 15 to 20 of those Tylenol pills we're looking at. You take that all at once, you'll be dead in 3 days. It is one of the most lethal ways to commit suicide. These are not completely benign, although we treat it that way. During pregnancy, when the chromatin is open, pregnant women, in my opinion, should be exposed to as little as possible. And here now is a signal reminding us, CDC doing what it's supposed to do, HHS advising us, not taking medication away, not telling us exactly what to do, advising us that there's a signal. And Trump then said, hey, this is a common sense thing. Why would you do it? Don't do it. But
And so women said, well, I would do it because I'm trying to own Donald Trump, who will never meet me, will never care what I'm doing. All of you women that were pregnant, you guys know what this is. Women who are pregnant endure incredible amounts of difficulty and pain. In fact, I know women, including my own wife, who will avoid any kind of medications whatsoever, all pharmaceutical interventions, on the possibility that they could be pregnant during their childbearing years. They don't use things when they have difficult cramping. They don't want to, pollute their body. They're worried about making sure that they have a place to be able to bring a child in without any of these like third-party sort of chemicals coming in and interrupting any process. And men, we don't have to do that. Luckily, we can take Advil. You go and have a hard workout, or you go work in the yard and you realize you got back pain that you didn't used to have because suddenly you're over 40 and that's the way it works. Fine. We don't have that same sort of concern. I know women that endure all kinds of incredible pain and migraines and stuff. Why? For the safety of a baby, or even the potential that there is a baby that they don't even know about yet. That's a real thing. And then you got crazy people doing this nonsense. This is a nurse for America's Frontline Nurses. She's talking about what I think might be the worst story that I've heard probably this week, that in order to own the president of the United States, who will never find out about this, some woman did a lethal amount of Tylenol. And I feel like she probably did it while on video, just like we saw that other lady do. If you've worked in emergency medicine, you know that one of the scariest things to find out is that someone has an open Tylenol bottle next to them and the bottle is drained and that they were suicidal. Because it doesn't mean that they're just going to die. It means they're going to die in an incredibly painful, gut-wrenching fashion. And everyone's going to have to watch it happen slowly over a period of days. Every single medic I've ever heard, like every medical class in the EMT and the paramedic space, learns like when you see that, that is a gut-wrenching sensation. And this woman is the nurse who got a phone call from a husband that's dealing with this right now. This is an awful story.
So it's about, it's going to be 6 a.m. finally. And for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, I recommend that you do. I got a call, a very frantic call at 4 o'clock in the morning from a husband whose wife is now dying of liver failure on a ventilator in an ICU because she was trying to prove that Tylenol doesn't cause autism because of what Trump said on the news. Mind you, that's a Harvard study. Now, whether or not you believe the Harvard study or not is not the issue here. The issue is that she's somewhere between 23 to 25 weeks and she overdosed on Tylenol. And she's going to die. She's not going to come off that ventilator. And the guy got my phone number from somebody. Somebody gave it to him. I mean, guys, it's early in the morning. I'm still in Hello Kitty sweatpants in my gym trying to work out. And she's going to die. It's going to be, let me tell you something about Tylenol overdosing and death, is that if you aren't administered the antidote, it is a very slow and painful death, okay? Because Tylenol, as well as Benadryl and aspirin, are the three most common OTCs that people will typically try to unalive themselves with, so they don't get censored. But now people are just taking massive amounts of Tylenol to prove Trump wrong. I mean, weren't these the same people who put Harvard and Fauci and the pillars of science on a pedestal? And now they refuse to believe it. Like, I don't believe it either. But I'm also not going to go overdose on Tylenol either.
That seems pretty sensible. We don't have to all agree on things, but it's like, why are you even taking this risk? Dr. Drew said it right. You avoid everything Sometimes you have to take something. You will find that doctors and reputable clinicians are always going to be very, very reticent to try to do anything when somebody is pregnant because nobody wants responsibility for that. So to go out there and voluntarily ingest any amount of a pharmaceutical that you don't need because you want to upset Donald Trump, you're nuts. And you know what? We should be protecting women from that terrible decision. Anybody who's ever lived with a pregnant woman, sometimes they get emotional. Sometimes they say some wild things. Maybe it's time to get off the internet for a little bit, ladies. This is the saddest possibility because this man he was going to be a father, maybe a father again. He's lost his wife. He's lost his baby. They don't know if they're going to be able to save the baby, and the baby's probably going to have problems that premature. What a horrible, horrible situation, and completely induced by what? Like sort of the Trump derangement syndrome? Like that is a fatal case of Trump derangement syndrome. Absurd. Sad and crazy. All right, we're going to go into a little bit more in the news. Hey, Kyle, how come you entitled this Jim Comey got indicted? Are we going to talk about that? We are, but you know what? We're saving it for the end because there's so much information to share, which is to say that we don't actually even know. I don't want to give it away, but like, we don't even know. You know what happens when you announce that you're going to indict someone in the future? It means that we don't have the indictment. You remember what I told you guys that this is an ongoing position of this program? When you have the goods, you just indict someone. You take it to a grand jury, you swear out the facts, and then they go, of course, yes, we will return a true bill, and you can go arrest that person, or they can surrender themselves. That's what normally happens in law enforcement. A federal crime happens, it is investigated, the facts are presented to a grand jury, and then the grand jury gives a true bill. So you can go and you can move them into the next phase. And then that person either pleads out or they go into trial and discovery and all the fun things that go along with that. I say fun in air quotes. It's obviously not fun. Now, when you're looking for a messaging campaign and a narrative, what you do is you announce that you intend to indict someone. Why would you do that? What are you going to indict them for? Oh, that doesn't matter. We're just going to go out there and throw it out against the wall. So that's where we're going to end up with today. And I think that all of this stuff is either going to result in no action. They don't get it fast enough. Shucks, we missed the statute of limitation. Or we're going to find out that it's something really dumb and weak. And all of it is bad. It's really good to say that you want to, quote unquote, lock her up. It actually turns out to be pretty bad when you go out and try to do that. Her being Hillary Clinton, him being Jim Comey or any of the other members. Like, I thought that the whole point was, and I get the idea of a revenge tour and everybody wants to see something. It needs to actually happen in a place that matters. It needs to actually happen for reasons that people can say, aha. I asked this question online yesterday. Indicted for what? And people are like, sedition, treason, words that feel very strong and I don't know anything about. Like, there's a ton of foolishness out there. And it's not actually going to end up being a great thing. And I don't actually think it goes anywhere of substance. I think it's actually going to cause a major headache. So if the process is the punishment is your goal, congratulations. You're doing the same thing as the other team. Speaking of which, the other team is having a rough time right now. And so there's a story going out that the White House is going to try to own this government shutdown. It's very interesting. All the headlines say White House tells agencies to prepare for mass layoffs for a potential government shutdown. You guys know that I'm in favor of these things. I think they're freaking great. It's not even bad for the employees. They all get paid in the back end. They get like an unexpected vacation if they're not considered essential. And if they're essential, they go to work and they just get a delayed payment. And I had that same thing happen to me in two different situations. But it's phrasing it that the White House is the problem. And so you're getting MSNBC finally getting a little bit of sort of like even-handed pushback, only because the numbers don't say it. Here's Chuck Schumer trying to act like everybody hates everybody and nobody's to blame except the White House maybe. But I kind of feel like the team that doesn't want to come to the table, there isn't a majority group. And if you need to have just a couple of people from the minority cross over, they should probably own it. At the end of the day, if I was the Republicans, I would own it. I'd be like, yeah, we're shutting down the government. Why? Because we believe in small government and smaller government is better. Instead, everybody wants to push this blame. So here's Chuck Schumer trying to push blame around.
Look, people are upset in general. They don't like the Democrats. They don't like the Republicans. And they don't like Trump even more than they don't like the Democrats. But here's what's really interesting, Joe.
But the polls don't show that, though. That's my question to you.
Well, his numbers have gotten much, much worse.
I mean, yeah. Okay, fine. That's what you're going to claim. At the end of the day, the White House is laying the groundwork for mass government firings if there is, in fact, a shutdown. The Office of Budget Management, or the Office of Management and Budget, says in a memo that agencies should prepare reduction in force plans, or RIFs, to accompany furloughs if a spending bill isn't passed next week. That'd be great, by the way, as far as I'm concerned. I always want smaller government. That sounds better to me. The White House is raising the stakes with a potential government shutdown by drafting resolutions for federal agencies to prepare reductions in force plans in case Congress doesn't pass a spending bill before October 1st. Again, this is all saber rattling because at the end of the day, what are we going to see? A continuing resolution. What is the one thing that Mike Johnson said he was done with? a continuing resolution. Who do I place this squarely on? The Speaker of the House, who should just say, yeah, we're not going to do this. We're going to shut down the government. We're fine with that. It turns out nobody will notice. Almost nobody will notice the federal government because the essential workers still show up. And if you make a decent salary for as long as you've been there, look, I was a federal employee for 2 years when we had our first sequester where they stopped paying us. I was fine. We got paid okay. Like, live responsibly and it's not going to be a problem, especially the people that are in the national security posts. And if you are living paycheck to paycheck in a national security thing, you are a national security threat. Go figure. They actually used to like sort those people out. That was the problem with Robert Hansen. He lived outside of his means. Anyway, in this memo, it was obtained by NBC News. The Trump administration indicated it's preparing to go beyond the traditional furlough of government employees during the shutdown and actually fire them. Okay, fine. With respect to those in federal programs whose funding would lapse and were otherwise unfunded, such programs are no longer statutorily required to be carried out. RIF notices should be prepared. Furlough notices for any lapse in appropriation. Now, again, I highlighted this at the beginning of the week. Mike Johnson came in as Speaker on the promise that he was going to give us single issue appropriation bills. Every single agency should be funded one at a time. Has that ever happened? Folks in the chat know what I'm talking about. That's never happened. He's never once kept up his end of the deal. And so I don't really care who gets the blame. Somebody should be racing to take credit for this. If you want to talk about people, if you want to get folks, you guys all always call people rhinos for voting the way that Republican parties do. My argument continues to be that a quote unquote rhino is a conservative person in the Republican Party because you are a Republican in name only. There's nothing that indicates Republicans are interested in conservatism. There's nothing that indicates that they're interested in small government based on their own words. If these guys were serious, if Mike Johnson was serious as a speaker, what would he have done? He would have showed up and he would have said, fine, no more CRs. We're going to spend the entirety of our sessions drafting individual budget bills, and we're going to make sure that we can pay for the government one line at a time. That takes a lot of hard work, doesn't it? And you can't do as many Fox News hits. That's not really sexy. You're not going to be able to do any fun like hearings about stuff that doesn't matter. So we're not going to ever do that. Anyway, it is causing problems over on the Democrat side. There's a story that's being run. Who is this running this? I think this is NBC News as well. Democratic anger over their own party fuels the 2026 primaries. People that are pissed off at the Democrat Party. Trump said it the other day. He's like, they're disorganized. They're chaotic. In true Trump fashion, he said they're losers. They're having a problem because people are not motivated because they don't see organization. They don't see a message that actually lands with them. And they're kind of disjointed. So you have this historic opportunity to actually do real good on the right if you believe in conservatism. And of course, Republicans, just like we showed you the other day, same wing, same side, same plane. There's nothing different about these two groups. They all operate in the same. They have these fake fights. It's theatrical. And it's very disappointing. But I do think that you're going to see some interesting moves in the primary. So we'll keep an eye on what the Democrats are doing for that. Should we talk about Jim Comey? I told you that we would. There's just not that much fun to it. There's just nothing but speculation. Federal prosecutors are nearing a decision on whether to charge James Comey. Sources say, it's the famous sources say, coming from CBS News in this case. It says federal prosecutors are nearing that decision. They're going to decide whether to seek an indictment. Again, if you have the goods, you just get the indictment and you announce the indictment. That's what the press release is. You don't announce your decision to decide in the future whether or not you're going to do it. Here are a couple of different news agencies covering this. How about CNBC? We don't get a lot of coverage from them.
Multiple sources familiar are telling them that former FBI Director James Comey is expected to be indicted within coming days. They say this is a fluid situation, but that is the current expectation, is that an indictment would come out of the Eastern District of Virginia, potentially on allegations of lying to Congress back in 2020 in testimony up on Capitol Hill. Now, you'll remember, Scott, that the Eastern District of Virginia is where President Trump recently forced out a prosecutor who he argued was not moving fast enough to move ahead with charges against some of the people that President Trump views as his political enemies. You saw over the weekend the president posting on social media urging his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to proceed with cases against James Comey and others. The president tweeting over the weekend, or posting over the weekend, I should say, Pam, I have reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story, no talk, all talk, no action, nothing is being done. What about Comey?
Where is he reading these statements? Is Donald Trump trying to get policy off reading Twitter and True Social? Because, again, that sounds like a terrible idea. You know what's also terrible is this picture of James Comey that I found. If you guys have not seen it, this is another opportunity. If you're watching on Spotify, you can just hit video now. If you're listening on Spotify, I suppose. If you're watching on the video stuff, you guys can see here. James Comey is a giant middle finger to the American people. How do I say that? Because I have a picture of him looking like the middle finger when he was standing with my family. He's like 6'9". He's huge. If you ever see one of my detractors who's online is my former supervisor, and he's kept a picture. Do you know how nutty you have to be to keep a picture of Kyle Seraphin and Jim Comey on your phone, just so at some point in time you can rage tweet it out to like 13 people because nobody follows him? But he does it, and it's very amusing. And people always hit me up and they're like, dude, are you a midget? And I'm like, no, he's a giant. He's an actual giant. 6'8", 6'9". He wears dress shoes. He's huge. And when there's this picture of me and my family, which is very, very funny, Jim Comey's in the middle. And then it's like me and my dad on either side. And then my wife and my mom are on the wings. And we literally look like a middle finger with like knuckles sticking out because he's seriously a foot plus taller than us. Very funny stuff. James Comey, you know, he's going to be able to have good lawyers. He's obviously very prominent. People are going to go out there and defend him and protect him. Is this really the do something that people were hoping for? Is that the consolation prize you guys are going to settle for? It doesn't make any bit of sense to me. This is MSNBC covering the same story. Everybody thinks it's going to be about perjury. Perjury? And by the way, the statute of limitations basically lapsed at the end of this month, which is like a couple days.
Three sources familiar tell MSNBC former FBI Director James Comey is expected to be indicted in the coming days. The full extent of the charges being prepared against Comey is unclear. Joining us now, MSNBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian and MSNBC Senior Investigative Correspondent Carol Lenig. Chris O'Leary, Ashley Parker, still with us.
Super panel right there. You got the FBI guy that's not sure whether or not white supremacists have now become the people on the hard left using writing on magazines. You got Ken Delanian, who was famous with a bunch of other sort of like interesting reporting, we'll call it, on the Fusion GPS story that you guys love. Anyway, all of this is bad. Here's the last piece of it, though. Is it really a good look for the sitting president, the chief executive in this country, to go out there and say they're all guilty as hell and justice must be served and we have to indict this guy? Like, why? Can we just not do that, please? Can we stop being cartoons? There's moments when Trump does it right. There's moments when he doesn't. This is clearly one of the ones that's the worst. Jake Tapper asking the question, hey, what the hell would they charge him with? And this lady's like, Donald Trump may not care, but I think prosecutors care, because if you bring bad charges, then there's the worst case scenario, which is that the grand jury doesn't indict. By the way, the grand jury should be able to indict anything. Probable cause is a much lower burden of proof, as it says here in the CBS story. And then you guys who have ever been in law enforcement know what I'm talking about. But doggone it. Like, what if they return no bill? What if a grand jury in EDVA, in Eastern District of Virginia, says, I don't think so. No, we're not going to do that one. You don't have it. Wouldn't that be awful? Wouldn't that be the worst? Wouldn't that be the worst look? So you're putting yourself at risk here with something that's weak. Perjury to Congress?
And just to be clear here, President Trump wanting a prosecution of James Comey, does it matter what the charge is, or he just wants his political enemies charged with something?
Well, I think to prosecutors it matters. I mean, I don't think that the president is necessarily the closest observer of the criminal law, but I do think that for prosecutors, they realize there has to be a case that they can argue.
That seems pretty straightforward. I like that. I think that the battle cry of something, it resonates with some of us, but usually not all the time. My famous example of that is one of my buddies and I had a late night one night. We were editing. This is how wild I was when I was in my late 20s. We were drinking whiskey and editing Wikipedia pages that we thought were funny. So that was pretty nerdy and lame. We woke up in the morning and the desert sun was beating down on our face. It's like 9:30. We had a bunch of stuff to do. We had a friend that was getting married that day and we were supposed to go get all the chairs and drag something. And he walks out, looks at me while the dog's licking my face and I'm laying there on this couch like feeling terrible. And he looks at me in his boxer shorts and he kind of scratches his belly. And we both know we got to get up and get to work, but neither of us wanted to. And he just yelled, something! Doing something is a really bad battle cry when we're talking about the DOJ, like the actual, like the Justice Department taking action. And something, anything? No. Just why? So I put it out on yesterday's social media post. If you guys follow me over there, you'll see I just reminded you that the R in MAGA stands for results. And I was answered in kind with those of you who like the meme. There have been 0 arrests for corruption. There's been 0 politicians arrested. There have been 0 deep state actors and blah, 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 blah. You know, January 6 files are still not all turned over. We still don't have Epstein truth and whatever that looked like. There's all these questions. Is this really the battle that you're going to fight? It just seems bad. I don't like any of it. I'm just sad about it. In sort of the more positive way, Trump still has a sense of humor about stuff. We talked about Jimmy Kimmel at the beginning. I'm going to kind of give you this as like our kind of walking out the way of just a little bit of humor. Apparently, they took down the Biden portrait on this wall of portraits, and they put up a picture of the auto pen. This is really silliness, and this was also covered by CNN.
It is kind of interesting this happens amidst this discussion about whether late-night comedians are too mean.
Why, you think he's trying to compete with Kimmel? Is that his gag today?
It's very gag-oriented.
It is. It shows me it's an administration of trolls led by trolls, because we're a nation of trolls now. We're dunking on each other all the time.
That's true. Great. A nation of trolls. That's what I was hoping for. That's what I voted for, right? A nation of trolls. I actually voted very transactionally in the last election. I just wanted Steve Baker not to go to prison, and that turned out to be the case. So I guess I should stop complaining about it. And then also there's this moment. Again, the First Amendment is not absolute. And I told you I would tell you this at the beginning of the show. Peter Strzok, famous FBI agent, anti-Trump text messenger. He's lost a First Amendment case over his firing. This is being reported by Politico. This is actually one of the a little amusing bits of news. He had a this is a multi-year lawsuit where he claimed that he was illegally fired because of his text messages, which was a violation of the First Amendment. And that's a hot take for sure. Strzok argued in the lawsuit that his FBI bosses retaliated against him in order to placate Donald Trump, who was outraged over the text messages that Strzok exchanged while investigating ties to the 2016 Trump campaign and Russia. In a ruling Tuesday, U.S. District Court Judge Amy Jackson said, after several years of gathering evidence and testimony from those involved in the 2018 decision to terminate the veteran counterintelligence agents, Strzok's lawyers failed to show that his dismissal violated his First Amendment rights. Jackson is an Obama appointee, stressed that she was not ruling on whether or not his firing was the appropriate sanction for his conduct, only that voluminous evidence assembled over the years of litigation, including a deposition of Donald Trump himself, had not proven that Strzok's rights were violated. Let me say that in a slightly different way. If you're a government employee and you're texting your mistress, that is not First Amendment protected stuff if you say things that are stupid and would be otherwise a fireable offense. I don't know. I found that somewhat amusing. He did get to walk away with $1.2 million in a settlement as well because the last Justice Department paid him out. So ain't that something? Ain't that grand? We're going to go to a palate cleanse in 1 second. I will just do this reminder, folks. You can follow us on Spotify. I've mentioned it a few times. It's KyleSerafinshow.com. That's the cheat code. Send it to a friend. Just put it in a text message. Send it on over and say, hey, check out this guy. He's got some things to say. Or you can go join us on Locals if you guys want to be part of the discussion. We're doing our call-in show tonight. That's going to be this evening. You got to be a member over on Locals or on YouTube, or you could be a member over on X. Go ahead and like the video if you're watching. Share it with a friend. Subscribe to the channels where you're seeing it. We appreciate all of you. I will give you this palate cleanse. This is something kind of we don't normally do. This is both a political discussion and a really good feel-good moment. If you're going to skip out on school and you want to have a good reason, wouldn't it be kind of cool to have photographic evidence that you were actually listening to the Vice President of the U.S.? Here's J.D. Vance taking a question from the crowd. It's like a young kid. The ball's on this kid. I kind of respect as well. Here's just kind of a lighthearted moment.
Young man, this is a very earnest young man. He doesn't look like a journalist to me, but go ahead and shout out a question because I'm not going to deny that level of energy and that level of passion. First of all, what's your name?
Henry.
Henry. It's good to meet you, Henry. Ask your question, please.
I skipped school today. I was wondering if I could get a picture with you.
He said, I skipped school. Isn't this the country you want to live in? That seems okay.
Henry said, I skipped school. Can I have a picture with you? Well, I guess you got to have some excuse to skip school, so I might as well get a photo with Henry.
What do you guys think? Is this staged? I don't know. I think it's cute. Look at that kid. Got the hat, got the America. It's going to do a selfie. Good on all that. Good on the crowd, too, by the way. You may not like what he had to say. All right. That's kind of a feel-good moment, you know, at the end of the day. Do that. Take your kids and go see the vice president. Don't put a bunch of Tylenol in your belly. That sounds like the worst thing. All right. For all of you in the chat, thanks so much for joining us this morning. God bless you guys. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Thursday. If you guys want to join us for the call-in show, again, you've been warned. It will happen, and we look forward to seeing you. It will happen right here in this little home studio that we roll. It's a one-man show, folks, and you guys got to see it once again today. I look forward to talking to you and finding out what you're interested in tonight. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and God bless.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.